for the beauty of the earth. I know I've mentioned my mom lots of times, and this particular part, some of you may remember, but it's such an impact on my life and my kids' life and grandkids and great-grandkids. Mom, because of her discovery of Jesus, when she was she thinks about 29 and 30, that began to grow in her and find expression in different things and in creation itself. And so my mom was a lover of creation, and she would often remark, even the smallest insect, just imagine its central nervous system and the complexities and all the little stuff that are almost microscopic to us. And she would just be in awe of creation. And when we would be driving, she would talk about the beauty of the landscape, the weeds that were on the side of the road when they're blooming, the blues and the whites and Queen Anne's lace and different things like that. She would oftentimes just comment on that and the deep blue of the sky in the fall. She enjoyed realizing God also declares His glory to us in the heavens. And this is the story that I'm sure I've mentioned, but it's just such a part of the Boatman family lore. When my niece Mia, my first niece, I was 13 when she was born, and she was a little girl about 2 or 3, and she was killing ants at Grandpa and Grandma's house. And my mom saw what she was doing, and my mom said to Mia, "Oh, Mia," she witnessed her stepping on an ant, just senselessly. And she said, "Oh, Mia, you mustn't just kill to be killing." And Mia looked up and she said, "Grandma, that was a bad ant." As we are aligned with Christ, it is my sense that there are 4 relationships that with which we are connected. There is our primary relationship with God. Then there is our relationship with people. And then a relationship with self. And we sometimes don't think about that, but relationship with self. And a relationship with creation. I think those 4 things, everything else pretty much fits within them. And so because God is primary, Mark chapter 12, verses 29 through 31, the Great Commandment. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. That's the Shema. Hear, Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. And the second is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So there's 3 of those. God, love your neighbor, love yourself. It is my growing belief that our unity, better said, our harmony with people, with self, and creation is a manifestation of that harmony or disharmony between ourselves and God. In other words, that the kingdom will find its expression in our relationship with people, with self, and with creation. And that can manifest in many, many different ways. But that we become aware more and more, at least, of how God would have us manifest in that relationship of love with Him towards people. One of the things that I'm trying to remove from my vocabulary, and it doesn't always happen, sometimes I digress, but you know how we can sometimes lump certain groups into those people, or that group, right? You ever find yourself thinking that way or talking that way? If you're a Democrat, maybe you'll say, those Republicans. If you're a Republican, you may say, those Democrats. And we just sort of lump everyone together. I've got to believe that God doesn't do that. That He sees us as individuals, and that we really need to learn to foster that, seeing each other as individual people and not just love. It's too complicated for that. Frankly, I'm an independent. Sometimes I feel more like a Republican, sometimes I feel more like a Democrat. So I just stay independent so I can speak prophetically to both groups. Because there are areas that both platforms speak to that I agree with and disagree with. So we're more complicated than just lumping people with a group. our relationship with self. When we are in abusive relationships, then that is not only a violation of ourself, but it affects our relationship with God. And so part of that manifestation of walking with God is learning to have healthy boundaries. It's learning to have that inner sense of grace, love, and truth that emanates from our own inner spring in Christ. So our relationship with self becomes critical. When you say, I have no value, or I'm worthless, or you think in those terms, or you act in those terms, that's really a violation against the new creation that you have become. God doesn't make junk. God has created you, and God doesn't create junk. Look at your neighbor and say, you're not junk. God doesn't do that. So we have this relationship with people and with self and with all of creation that manifests in different ways. And I'm not going to interpret all of that individually for us, but just to be aware that that's how God is moving. And I'm wanting us to understand that because of today's passage in Romans chapter 8. We ended last week with this verse, in the 17th verse. It says, and in children, then we are heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ, if indeed we suffer with him, in order that we may also be glorified with him. And we talked about last week how entering into his suffering means we enter into his passion, which is to do the will of God. We enter into his sympathy, which is to be genuinely compassionate towards and concerned for other people. And we enter into his struggle, which is striving against sin, to bring it into subjection to the rule of Christ within our lives. So that sets us up for the continuation of this passage in the next one, verses 18 and 19. Paul says, for I consider that the sufferings of this present time. Now, think with me what that would mean. Sufferings of this present time. Paul is first century. Is he talking about the sufferings that they are experiencing as a Jewish Christian, both from his Jewish colleagues, the Judaizers, and from the hierarchy within Judaism, the Sanhedrin? Is he talking about that group? Probably. That's present time. Is he also talking about the conflict and the impending conflict and subsequent persecution, especially after AD 70, that Christendom would experience with the Roman Empire? After AD 70, there was a clear delineation between Christianity being just an extension of a Jewish sect and Christianity standing on its own. And so it was from that point that it really marks the accelerating persecution that happened in the Roman Empire. Because Emperor Titus had invaded Jerusalem, ransacked the temple, desecrated the temple, and the Jewish people were slaughtered and killed in an unmerciful way. And the Christian Jews, heeding Jesus' words, when these things happen, when you see the desecration of the temple happen, then flee. The Christian Jews fled. So that became a division that really would never be repaired. And also the Romans then started seeing Christians as not just a sect of Jews, but as followers of this Christ. And so persecution accelerated. Is he talking about that at the present time? I think so. But I think broader than that, I think in some ways a case could be made that until Christ returns, until heaven returns to earth, if you will, and fills earth with its glory, that we are living in the present time. In other words, we are always going to be living in a time where the world's currents conflict with the currents of Christ. Where to follow Jesus' passion of doing the will of God, we're going to run into some roadblocks. To follow Jesus' suffering of having real compassion for other people, we're going to run into some roadblocks. And in our struggle against sin, We're going to run into some currents of the world that would explain it away, that would call it nonsense, that would call us holy joes, that would do all kinds of different things. We're going to run into roadblocks. So those are the currents in which we are always going to be pitted against. If, Paul says, for I consider that the sufferings of this present time, so first century, but I think it's also something that applies today. The sufferings that we are in our own present time, the 21st century, are not worthy. But here's the point. They are not worthy to be compared with the glory that is to be revealed to us. I've never had a baby. My father, 3, but I've never had a baby, you understand? And so when I even begin to use having a child as a metaphor, I'm in troubled waters as a guy, right? Because every woman in here is probably thinking, what does he know about this? Really, other than the screaming, precious little. I have a friend who I used to work with at the juvenile home, and he told his story of how when his wife was in the throes of childbirth, it was happening, she was yelling, and he said, honey, can I help you? And he got too close, and he said she grabbed me by the collar and pulled my face up to her face and said, yes, get me out of here, you. And she used a very colorful metaphor. But I do know this. The travail that a woman is in, this is as an observer, the travail that a woman is in, even in some cases with 24 hours of labor, when that baby then is actually born, to see the expression on that mother's face is priceless. The glow, the pride, the love, as she holds that little child in her arms. Now that little child's going to sometimes give some problems when that child grows up. Had someone just this morning say to me, teenagers. And I quoted them what my father often quoted. He had 3 boys, you understand. He often quoted Mark Twain. And my wife used to think this was terrible. But anyway, this was my upbringing. My dad used to quote to us 3 boys, when a boy reaches 14, you ought to stick him in a barrel and feed him through the hole. When he turns 16, you ought to put a cork in the hole. So we do outgrow that baby stage. But nonetheless, the beauty, the glow, the pride, the love that happens after the birth, after the travail. And then, it's not long after that, ready to have another child. You forget the pain of the moment because of the glory that is that mystical birth in which God is so intertwined with the human encounter and experience. That's what Paul is talking about, though, on a grander scope. That any persecution we experience, any suffering we have that comes by the passion for doing God's will, by the sympathy or compassion we have in helping other people, and by the struggle we have against sin itself. All of that pales by comparison when we experience the glory that is to be revealed to us. When not only we put on, or God for us puts on the glorified body, but we're going to learn that creation itself is affected. It says, for the creation waits. Now, have you ever thought about being connected with creation? But it's almost as though Paul is animating the creation for us here. For the creation waits with eager longing. It seems much broader than just the new creation here, that he's not just talking about Christians. He's not just talking about people. He's talking about something of which is broader than that we're all connected with. For the creation waits with eager longing. One translation says with eager expectation. One translation says with anxious longing for the revealing of the children And the next slide says this. For the creation was subjected to futility. Help me get my head around this and help you get yours around it as well. The word futility means meaninglessness, purposelessness. For the creation was subjected to meaninglessness, purposelessness, futility. I think it's talking about at the fall, theologically, that the creation became something it really wasn't designed to be. That even the most beautiful hues of a sunset, that even the landscape of the trees, the Georgia pines, or the Rocky Mountains, or the Atlantic or Pacific Ocean, that all the beauty of this earth is nonetheless tainted by something it was subjected to, that the fall not only affected humankind in its separation, but it affected all creation. Creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of Him, God, who subjected it in the hope that creation itself also will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. So what I think that means, and I'm still growing in my understanding of this, but as my relationship is growing from God, people, self, creation, that we're connected in this, I think it means that the redemptive act of Jesus, i.e. the cross, resurrection, ascension, the redemptive act of Jesus leads us to the restorative, ongoing work of Jesus. That it's not enough just to redeem an old, dilapidated car that's been in an accident. It's not enough to redeem it from the salvage yard. We then have to restore it. That's the process in which we are in. Now, it's going to have its ultimate expression in glorification. But until then, we are being sanctified. The process is ongoing, even in this fallen world, even in the situations in which we find ourselves. It is in the process of God having redeemed us and now restoring us until ultimately, He's giving us a picture in this verse, I think, of what is going to be. It is the ultimate expression when, a lot of times we talk about, well, when we all go to heaven. I think, theologically, that it's more accurate to understand that heaven will come to us. That heaven, in other words, is going to manifest its glory and recreate the earth, the heavens and the earth. And we are going to be absorbed in the glory of God.